Yeah. Hey, what's up? Silas here. In this video, I'm going to be answering these 7 questions I found for liberals. I think it was a conservative person asking a liberal, and I want to try and have this empathy thing where I can kind of argue something from somebody's point of view. Now, it's not that hard to do when it comes to this because I think I was more on the political left in the past, but now I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm more conservative. If politically, I'd say conservative would map out well, but it's based on the non-aggression principle, having laws that there's no ruling class that can set laws that they're above and beyond that they don't have to follow. There's no political party that can say, yes, if you are not in our party, in our in group, if you do X action, it's positive. But if you don't, if we do it, it's negative. Or let's say if you do this thing, it's negative. If we do it, it's not even mentioned. How we talk about these incongruities that we see in society where somebody's like all cultures are the same, or we can't point out that something is horrible in this one culture, or we just want this kind of massive growth of states where we have this overreaching body controlling everything that we do, this collectivist type of ideas that leads to the horrible, horrible situations like what just happened in, I think it was Luton. I just watched this video by Stefan Molyneux. I think I'll leave a link below. And he makes a pretty good case, pretty convincing case that some of these whole situations where you have people, mostly Pakistani men, going to the United Kingdom and grooming these people in these poor societies, in these poor places in Europe, in Britain, these communities that for various reasons, welfare state kind of situations, you find fathers are not there present in the homes. Then the girls are out there, they're being preyed upon. Then these people are grooming them, putting them in these horrible rape situations. This horrific thing, and you're wondering why are people doing this? Because people politically on the left have just this sickness in how they view the world, where it just doesn't make any sense. And uh, it's just very frustrating. I'll leave a link below to that. It's tough watching. The material discussed is very heavy, but if you want to check it out, I suggest you check it out, whether you're in the political left or the right, and see if you can refute some of the things that he's put out there. And I know he's doing it with a body of work that's kind of led up to some of this, so there may be some background info. But then you see an article where somebody says, I found this article where some police said there was 20 calls, there was 20 different situations where they just said, oh, it's too difficult, it's too much of a problem to actually follow these cases, to follow these accusations. Someone had actually sent, some parent had actually sent a list of a, a list of 3 pages of possible suspects of the people who were preying on the daughter, and the police did nothing. Then you go to the Florida situation where you have the situation where how many times did they actually report this kid as a possible threat? There was actually people who wanted him institutionalized before the situation, and he still went out there and killed these kids. And now you have these kids in the streets saying, oh, we need guns taken away, we need more government. I'm like, you guys are idiots, you don't know what you're talking about. And there's just so much frustration here. But I think there's a lot of people talking past each other. And these situations where when you're here in Nairobi, Kenya, when you're here in developing country, you don't have that kind of thing to say, oh yes, the police haven't actually done what we expect them to do, because you just have very low expectations of the police. So I think people in the West kind of need to understand a little more that, yes, some of these institutions that you think are going to do well, maybe when they do that badly, maybe when you see the situation, maybe when you see the failure in Florida, that's the average. That's how it normally is. When you see the corruption going on in the FBI in the United States of America, that's how things normally are. People are self-interested. They'll normally do things in their own interests, and they won't necessarily do things for other people just because you think that this benevolent force called the state will all of a sudden just have these superpowers, these supernatural tendencies, and do things. Anyway, so into these questions. I'm just going to read the questions. I'll leave a list below also to these questions. If you want to take a pause, you can go out there and you can actually read the questions, and then you can come back and listen to the rest of the video and see if you can answer them. So as I mentioned, these are going to be questions from somebody who is conservative asking this question to liberals. So I'm going to be answering them from the point of view as a liberal. Also, there's going to be going on the screen this speed drawing of this shirt that I released, this new merch, the don't stop talking ish, don't talk ish, or quit talking ish, where it's this kind of, I think a lot of things in politics, people are just talking ish. People don't really know what they're talking about. They just talk-ish. It's just feces, just mouth feces, mental feces, where they're just dumping all over the place. It's like squat, look, and leave it there, and like they just prance off like they just left like the most delicious meal ever. I'm like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. What are you saying? And I think this is part of me just trying to be more even-handed in my responses and say like, okay, how would somebody on the left respond to these questions? Okay, the first one. Since only 8 million people have Obamacare, how will 24 million people die if it is repealed? Will 16 million people be randomly shot? My answer was possibly inflating the numbers by attributing family members to the ones on the Affordable Care Act, as well as any prospective people that get aid when not covered. So that was just kind of explaining that, yes, what they're saying with this 24 million people will die, I know it's in general like an inflation of numbers, but I was also explaining that, hey, this is a way, you get to that number of 24 million by inflating the numbers, I guess, and also saying that, like, let's say somebody's working and then they're in the Affordable Care Act and they have a family of 5, you're adding those 5 people to the Affordable Care Act, and then if he loses his coverage or she loses their coverage, and those kids aren't covered too, so those kids are in danger of having issues, medical issues, and not being covered. But again, medical health care, this is an addition, this is not here in the response, but access to healthcare is a different thing than actually getting healthcare that actually helps you. In somewhere like Cuba, everyone has access to healthcare. It's a socialist state, yet the actual care, because there's not people flying from Miami to Cuba to get their health taken care of. Okay, number 2. If President Trump deleted all his emails, wiped his server with BleachBit, and destroyed all of his phones with a hammer, would the mainstream media suddenly lose all interest in the story and declare him innocent? My answer to this, as a liberal, was no, this would only be one of his many evils. And in general, this one, the conservative person asking this was kind of playing on what happened with Hillary Clinton. This is the things that she did, that she's found out to have been done during her campaign and things like this. People involved with her campaign did these things. And the media didn't really cover it as much, but I think it would have covered it a lot more with Trump. But with this, what I'm saying, like, yeah, they'll just move on to another evil, because you've seen this. With Trump, something is attributed to Trump and his people, and then it's found out not to be true, and the media just says, okay, yeah, that's not true. They normally don't even acknowledge it. They just move on to something else, and they kind of just like, yeah, that was just one thing. Let's move on to this next thing now. Like, oh, it's so frustrating. Okay, question number 3. If women do the same job for less money, why do companies hire men to do the same job for less money? My answer to this was spite and systemic sexism that overrides incentive to profit. Part of this system is that males intrinsically do not see the value in females and must be taught or litigated into realizing how valuable females are. Now, this one goes, I think, without explanation. For me, that's just a simple thing. If somebody's talking about the wage gap, first of all, as I mentioned before, the politicians are smart enough to say the earning gap. They don't say the pay gap. They mostly say the earning gap, because they understand. Now you can come to the point where if you point out that women choose different jobs that pay less, you compare a field like teaching that is 90% women to a field like engineering that is 95% males, the engineers are going to be paid more on average. So you point those two things, and yes, there's an earning gap, but does not necessarily mean there's some kind of different pay where it's like, yes, the women may be working, let's say it's a job, let's say it's the kind of teaching job where you actually are working 40 hours a week. And I know people say they work off of time. I've taught before. But anyway, you take the actual hours spent teaching, you take the actual hours spent engineering, and you point those out. On average, the engineers will be paid more money. This is a simple fact. Even if you don't count the fact that most teachers in the United States of America have summers off, and they can do other jobs, they can do other trainings and things like that, but that's time off of work. Anyway, so next question. Number 4. If you rob a bank in a sanctuary city, is it illegal or is it just an undocumented withdrawal? My answer to this was, what are sanctuary cities really? I really am asking here with this. In addition, they haven't decided to stop collecting taxes from citizens, so the city is being very selective on what federal laws they refuse to enforce. I think a bank robbery is one that they would gladly enforce. So this one I kind of went out of the whole like being a liberal kind of situation, and I think that's kind of a situation where they would just kind of dodge this question and say, okay, what is a sanctuary city? It's just a specific law, and actually legally, I think they aren't actually they aren't actually impelled to actually hold on to the person. There's some legalities in there where it's like this is actually a federal enforcement situation. But then now at that same point, the federal agency can say we're going to withhold the money because you're not being cooperative. There's this is general agreement where they should be cooperative, but they don't necessarily have to be. And this is just the general enforcement of things. What's enforced and what's not, and that's a regular thing. I think in any place that you live in, there's certain laws and crimes that are just not enforced that they could. Certain ones that are on the books from hundreds of years back, and then certain ones that not necessarily on the books from 100 years back, but are just not enforced because they just don't have the time. And as I mentioned, something like disgusting where you have that Luton situation with the grooming gangs where some police are just like, it's too hard. I just don't want to be bothered to do this, so I'm not going to do this. These people are humans and they do that kind of thing. It's disgusting. Anyway, question number 5. If liberals don't believe in biological gender, then why did they march for women's rights? My answer to this was, even if you choose to be a woman, or however you identify, I think the reasoning is that you are then oppressed. Similar to how whether being gay is a choice or biological, once gay, someone will say that you're now in a systemically oppressed group. So I don't agree with this systematic oppression, but I think I get why they do protest. I think when I was answering this, I kind of went out of being a liberal, but I was just saying that's kind of what they'd say. So they don't care if it's a choice or not. They don't care if you're black or not. Like one thing I wonder, someone like Rachel Dolezal, who was a leading member in a chapter of the NAACP, pretending to be black. She's a white lady. She's identified herself as black. Now there's this transracial thing. Was she now considered? Has she now come out from being this minority, this oppressed minority, into being this privileged group of people? But yes, she is female. So now with her being female, has she just switched the things that she's oppressed on? Even though white females, if you're talking about the wage gap, white females on average make more money, earn more money than black men. Definitely earn more money than black females. So now, her having being black, what kind of systemic oppression was she under that? And now when she trades that out, she's a black woman, now she trades it out. She's still earning the same amount of money, probably less now. I know she has like a Netflix documentary, so maybe she's making some money off of that. But let's say when she was found out to be white, she was still making the same amount of money. Did she go from one day from being oppressed in a certain way and now being oppressed in a different way as a white female? Or was she actually being oppressed in a way? Was she receiving some oppression in a way for her white femaleness? Because people were going at her, being like, "Ah, oh, you're a white female. You should do this and this." So they were actually technically pointing out her being a white female and having that be a specific reason to why they were holding her in negative light. So there's some weird things going on in there. Okay, so question number 6. Why is it that Democrats think superdelegates are fine, but they have a problem with the Electoral College? My answer to that was because the name super is in it, because super is in the name. I don't know. So more likely, most are complaining and or do not understand the systems used to elect and nominate officials. So gerrymandering, which is a whole thing where people once in power, they decide like we're going to make the map of our district or the people who vote for us into a certain way. And you just see the weird lines they have in these maps. If you think it's arbitrary how nations were created and divided up and lined out and the borders were put, you should see the odd little shapes and things that occur, and it's like abstract art, in creating places where you think it's going to be a favorable group of people to get you and your party the certain kind of votes that you want. So that's what gerrymandering is. So gerrymandering in and of itself should be enough and to have everybody up in arms, but it's not, because people don't understand that. When it gets to this point, Electoral College, I did an article on that, which I finally learned more about it, and it makes sense. If you look at that map, to have just those blue centers, those areas of the blue bloods, seem to be seeping the blood, drinking the blood from the red parts of the nation, from the rest of the nation into these certain locations. If you have those few states, few locations actually, despite the popular vote, if you have those few locations deciding the presidency, I think you'll have a very negative situation for the rest of the country. But anyway, so the Electoral College makes sense. It gives people a lot better representation. It comes historically from a situation where people wanted the representation to actually come in. Oh, jeez. So anyway, I'll leave a link below to that to the post that I did on the Electoral College, kind of explaining it out. There was a simple short video in there, kind of explaining what it is, and it made sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you if you guys still don't understand what it is. But moving on to the next one. If Hillary's speeches cost $250,000 an hour, how come no one shows up to her free ones? So my answer to this was the speeches never cost $250,000. The speeches were always free. The speeches themselves actually, if anything, were a punishment or a tax added on to the $250,000 purchase of political influence. Like, the people were just paying for that, and then it's like, yeah, instead of being taxed 10%, the state's taking that 10% taxation was having to listen to Hillary Clinton for X amount of time and pretend that you really do support and like the things that she's doing. So, yeah, that's it. I think the last one here, oh yeah, one last question. Is the DNC mad that Russia manipulated the election because they exposed the DNC manipulating the election? My answer to that was no, they really don't care about Russia, but they are mad and it's a convenient scapegoat. And that's one thing that's showing itself right now. Now it's found out that the Mueller investigation, the special counsel Mueller, who was put to investigate supposedly Russian collusion when it started, now he's investigating Trump campaign obstruction. Now, obstruction of what? Is it obstruction of the investigation into the collusion? The collusion narrative has conveniently been dropped off. The House Intelligence Committee released this document saying that they have actually found no collusion in anyone in the Trump campaign, so they're kind of closing the doors on that. They're going to release the material of that soon, once it's been redacted for the things that are highly sensitive and things like that. But people are coming out and saying, oh, if you touch Mueller, if you touch Mueller's investigation, then like that's the end for Trump, this and this. They don't really care about the Russia thing. The Russia narrative has lasted longer than I thought it was going to last. But they'll find something else. Once that goes away, they'll move on to something else. It's actually been found out that Russians had connections with people on the Hillary Clinton campaign, in the Bernie Sanders campaign. They were kind of influencing a lot of different things. If they really did care about Russia, then they would actually follow these other things. But they don't really care about these things. It's my team good, your team bad. What my team does is okay, what your team does is bad. That's all it is. That's the kind of narrative that's going on in the United States of America. Let me know, did you guys pause the video and go and read the questions and see, do they kind of line up to the things that I answered? Do you have different answers for some of these things? If you do, please let me know. Also, I hope you like the merch that was on the screen. Like, share, and subscribe. Go down to the merchandise store, buy some of this merchandise. There's also a Patreon below if you like the content that I'm making on this channel. Also, feel free to suggest different content. I may listen to you, may not. But once you actually join the Patreon, that's some of the things that are in there where it's like I'm going to have some situations where I want to interact more with the people that I'm kind of making this material for. And definitely much love, and not much love, LUV love, not the LOV love, LOVE love. I'm keeping the LOVE love for the special thing. But much love, LUV, for the people I interact with in the comment section. Really enjoy having those back and forths with the people and talking about different things. Yeah, so that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye.